November of 2009. It wasn't even a good parts car. It had already been stripped out. People took what was good off of it, which wasn't a lot. Almost every body panel was rusted or dented. This thing was the worst possible car you could want to frame off restore. This thing had floors that were full of holes. The pinch welds around the windows were completely gone. You couldn't put glass in it. It came apart really nice underneath because it rusted top down. It came from South Carolina, where pine needles would fall on the car, get stuck in behind the trim, and then that acid and sap would rust out the pinch welds. So once the window starts leaking, the floors and the dash are gone. The dash rusted completely away from the car. It's kind of crazy. There was nothing holding it in but the plastic clip around the steering column and the wiring harness. Once I unhooked those, I just pulled it right out of the car. I'm not a body guy. I'm the kind of guy that builds engines and transmissions, sets up gears, does suspension work, and that sort of thing. I'm a mechanic. I can't afford to pay somebody to do all this, and this car would have been $150,000 to have a shop do it, and it's not worth that. I mean, it's just your basic 4-barrel, 4-speed, Montero red 65 GTO hardtop. That's all it was. It was nothing special. It wasn't a tri-power, no ram air, no super duty, no nothing. So the only thing it had going for it was a GTO with the N code and the PHS stand. It's a GTO. I took the body off the frame and went from there. Built a rotisserie, sandblasted the frame, got it done and out of the way, pushed it outside so I could deal with it later. It took me roughly 3 years of work to make this thing drivable again. And the last time it drove was sometime in the 70s. So it'd been a long time. This car sat around and did nothing but rust and give up certain parts. It took 3 cars to put this thing back together. I was on a very tight budget. I didn't have a lot of money when I did this, so a lot of sweat equity went into it rather than buying a lot of parts. And at the time, there weren't very many parts available for 65 GTOs. No fenders, no doors, no full quarters. It was just patches and skins. But you could get floors, you could get the trunk lid, although the trunk lid I had was in good shape, the hood, and bumpers, things like that. But as far as like a full quarter, not happening. So you cut the floor out, you sandblast all the braces and supports underneath, and then you hit them with rust encapsulator or POR 15. I used both. The orange stuff is the rust encapsulator, black is POR. Both of them work pretty good, and the only thing that you have to be aware of with POR is if you put it on non-rusty flat metal, it flakes off. You can just chip it off with your fingernail. Nothing holds it. It's got to have something to grab onto. When you have a car on a rotisserie, if you pull too much of the car out at the beginning, then it'll just kind of warp and move around and collapse on you. That's why convertibles and smaller cars that are unibodies have to have all the braces put in them. This was a hard top. The rockers were in good shape. The roof was in pretty good shape. The C-pillars and A-pillars were all pretty structurally sound. But I was still worried about the floors, so I did them piece by piece instead of the whole thing all at once. In 2011, I found a 65 Tempest out in the woods. We cut it up one afternoon with my Sawzall, a bunch of packs of blades because you're always bending them, and 600 feet of extension cords. You lose a lot of juice going 600 feet of extension cord. The top pinch weld on the front windshield, that was completely gone and it was rusted out in too many spots, and I couldn't make another one. It just wasn't happening. So that Tempest got cut across the top of the A-pillars all the way across the roof, and that piece into the GTO across the front. Cutting the quarter off was a lot of trepidation. I realized after messing with the original, not even original, the quarter that was on the car when I got it on the driver's side was over top of what was left of one that got crushed. They just welded another one off of a Tempest back in the 60s, 70s, maybe early 80s with brazing. And they didn't bother making the wheel well fit or anything else. He just kind of like stuck it on there, said, yep, that's good enough, slapped some paint on it, and sent it out the door. Really shoddy collision work. So I had to fix all that. The radiator core support was even rusted, and I had to fix that. Luckily, the one on the Tempest was in good shape. Otherwise, it wouldn't have a good, decent one. The one that was on the GTO, the original one to it, that one was trashed. There was so many holes in it, and it was bashed. It just wasn't able to be fixed, so it's going to end up on the wall with a couple of trashed fenders, the original bumper off the goat, and the original grills off of it, because you might as well have some wall art. Middle of 2011, I got done with most of the metal work. The quarter was on and lined up relatively well with the door, and it got to the point where it's like, okay, now I can start doing filler, primer, all that stuff. That was a whole nother nightmare in itself. This is like the 6th car that I painted. The second one that I did in base clear. The first one I had just a stupid amount of orange peel because I didn't really grasp the whole concept of reducing and pressure at the gun. You know, the whole ball of wax that goes with painting a car now with all these modern paints, because it's not like the old enamels and lacquers where you just kind of shoot it on and you rub it on a little bit and it's good. You gotta follow the instructions and know what the hell you're doing, or you get some really interesting things going on. So when I put this thing together, I was thinking mild 400, pump gas compression, just 7-to-1, make it like a 79 Bonneville or Trans Am engine, low compression so you can drive it around. Put a Ram Air 3 size cam in it, set of manifolds, and a nice little 4-barrel carburetor. Finally able to drive it in the summer of 2012. No idea how long it'd been, but it'd been quite a while since that car moved under its own power. So I have this thing painted. I'm ready to start putting the nice stuff in it, the dash, interior, putting the engine and transmission in, getting the rear end redone for it. I was on one of the Pontiac forums. A guy in Flint, Michigan had a 65 Le Mans that a little old lady had owned, and it hadn't driven or moved since 1982. It was just sitting in a garage, and it had this really nice original parchment interior, bucket seats, the whole works. Cleaned up that interior, put it in the car, come out really nice. I was actually quite impressed at how well it preserved over the years, considering how old that interior is. The vinyl's all nice and supple, not really that cracky, although the driver's seat could really use another cover. Had a turbo 350 laying around, so I rebuilt it, went through the whole thing, made sure it was all fresh in there, and then put that in behind that 400. The original 256 rear end out of the Le Mans went into the GOAT with some UMI control arms, and man, that thing, I really like those control arms. They handle quite well. No wheel hop or anything. Put a sway bar on them off the 70 GTO. Picked up a set of rally wheels from Wheel Vintiques, 15x7s. In 2014, I built a carport, and I put the GTO in there with some of my other stuff. Went to Nebraska for the winter. Turns out we had 4 feet of heavy wet snow, and the carport collapsed on it the first time it snowed. It hit the goat on the fender, the A pillar, and the C pillar. So I had to fix all that, and I decided, well, since I got to repaint it and fix all this, I might as well fix the window channels that I screwed up and make it a color that I actually like. So it started going blue. 2015, I built me another shop on the land that I bought after I had to move from the other place that I had, where I built most of this thing, and I bought a lift. It was one of the best things I ever did, especially now that I'm old and decrepit and it hurts to crawl around underneath cars. started repainting it the spring of 2016 because my dad wanted me to bring my car down from Michigan, go to Nebraska, and do this 600-mile tour with 400 other vintage cars. And I didn't quite make it in 16. I hadn't been able to shake the car down yet on the highway and make sure everything was tight and all the bugs were worked out of it. And I didn't have it painted until and back together until 2 days before the tour was supposed to happen. So I didn't get to go that year. So I made a point of making sure that everything was good on the car and I had it exactly the way I needed it so that it was a reliable daily driver that I could just hop in and take off and drive 1,000 miles to Nebraska without a worry. That was all of 2016. I put maybe 2,000 miles on it every time I went into town. I took that thing just because it was like, we got to make sure, have a cell phone, have some friends, have a trailer and a truck at my house. Friend gives me a ride back. We pick up the car if it breaks, and it never really broke. Apparently I built a very reliable car. I've only had the trailer at home a couple of times, and that was due to electrical gremlins with the wiring harness that I put in it. It's not quite right. A couple of days after I got the base clear down on it and it cured enough, I started wet sanding it, because it doesn't matter how good you are with the gun, you're gonna have to wet sand the clear to get it to lay flat. Now, did I really have to do all that for a daily driver? No. But did I really have to do all that because my painting skills suck and I had orange peel and all kinds of other messed up stuff? Yeah. So 400, 1,000, 1,200, and I think 1,600, and then I buffed it. So it's not perfect, and it's got a bunch of swirl marks in it. It's got spots where I didn't get to it all the way, spots where I went through and found the light color underneath. But for the most part, it's nice and shiny, and it's got that new car look to it, even though it's almost 60 years old. I didn't put this thing together to be a show car, I put it together to be a driver. I painted it like a driver. I don't care if it gets scratched or dented like a driver. I'll fix it here and there if I need to, but for the most part, I just want to get in it, start it up, drive it into town, get the stuff that I need to get, and then come home. That's all I need to do. Maybe take it on a road trip, maybe go on a cruise with a bunch of other cars. That's all I want this thing for. I don't care about winning shows and trophies and whatnot. It's kind of quick because I just like lots of power. So 455s make lots of power. Might as well just put a 455 in it.